And we're live. It is Monday, February 10th, the year of the cactus's Lord, 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And I gotta tell you, folks, it's the sun is shining. No, it's actually not. The sun isn't shining. The birds are not chirping. It's not going to be a particularly great day unless you're, Elon Musk.
Or an
But,
Eagles fan. I've got my Eagles shirt.
oh, yeah, no, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl in a moment. None of that yet. You can't jump the gun with that stuff,
Sorry,
Holly.
it's too exciting.
But, cactus.
You're watching Dog Shirt TV, an effing revolution in morning television.
It is an effing revolution in morning television because, first of all, because the cactus says so, and secondly, because, apparently there was a Super Bowl last night. I didn't watch it, but I saw that it happened on social media. And so, Holly, did you watch the Super Bowl?
Oh, yes. We are big Eagles fans in our house.
Why are we big Eagles fans?
Well, that's a very long story.
Neither of you is from, and besides, you're a Taylor Swift person. Aren't you supposed to be rooting for that Kelsey character?
Yeah, but there's I have a lot of issues with the Chiefs. One being that they are becoming a dynasty, and I don't like that. So I don't like the Chiefs, but we really love the Eagles because it's a bit of a long story, but the short version is Jalen Hurts, the quarterback of the Eagles, played briefly for Oklahoma, which is my college team, and my daughter adores him. And he couldn't be a better role model for a kid. I mean, he's just a very outstanding individual in every way. He's just incredible. So we were super happy to see Jalen win a Super Bowl. And it was a drubbing. It kind of made me think that maybe, I don't know, I don't want to read too much into it, but maybe like the Lord woke up from his, several months nap, and maybe it's the beginning of more good things.
I always found it amusing when I was never a football fan, but I was a baseball fan as a kid until I learned that they were all, shooting heroin. I always found it amusing when players would cross themselves before an at bat or thank God when they won the game, as though God is a sports fan and he prefers if the Red Sox win, it's because God intervened on behalf of the Red Sox.
Yes, I'm with you on that. I'm being obviously facetious. However, I do think so. There's a whole theology on prayer and God's interaction with the human world that we can't get into, but you couldn't thank God not for intervening and causing your victory, but just you're grateful that is what happened, it's not like God chose this to happen for you, but you're grateful that your success somehow aligned with the grand plan unfolding, and there's a gratitude there. So you can be grateful to God.
No, I still don't think it makes any sense.
Okay.
So let's consider this.
Why not?
I go to the plate. It's the bottom of the ninth, or 2 minutes. You want to say it's the 2 minute left in the football game. The quarterback throws the ball, and I run and I catch it and drop it, and we lose as a result. And that is because I did not pray.
No, see, this is not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I'm just saying, in that situation, my prayer did not align with the grand plan, or my my victory did not align with the grand plan, and so um, I should be less grateful under those circumstances. I should curse God
No,
rather than in the situation in which exactly the same thing happens, only, I pray before the snap and I run and I catch the ball and I win, and then I'm supposed to have gratitude.
so you're not a very good Christian, first of all.
Correct.
But
I have no idea what I just
but
joined into.
also I think
We're talking about the theology of the Super Bowl.
not being grateful is not the same as cursing God. You can accept that there's that you're not in control, and that there's forces that you don't even understand in the world, and you can accept that your failure happened to align with whatever that, without being grateful for that. It doesn't mean that you're cursing. Doesn't mean that you're cursing God. I think you've taken a bit of a leap there.
No, no, no. I just want to say, like, if when you catch the ball and you've prayed, that you should be praising God because your actions align, your victory aligns with the grand plan. Case number one. Therefore, you thank God. And
Yeah.
you go on national television and you say something like, I'd like to thank my wingman, Jesus Christ, right? And that's case number one. Case number two, you drop the ball, and you should be the flip side of that coin is you should go on TV and say, damn it, my wingman Jesus Christ let me down, and I'm kind of pissed off about it. There's got to be some analogy to to that.
Then it's just all your fault. I can't believe I'm arguing this case because I actually make fun of, because my family, I come from a family of missionaries, and the prayer letters are an intense thing. And there's always prayer. You have to pray for the mission, and what the missionaries are doing is way more important than what anything you have in your little life. So if the missionary's car breaks down, that requires a prayer flash to go out to hundreds of supporters so that everybody can pray that your car, I guess, gets better or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, but what about the kids in the slum, a few miles away, that are, that have severe diarrhea right now, and maybe you should spend the time praying for them instead of the missionary's car. I do lots of logical attacks on this whole thing. I don't know. I'm just trying
I'm just saying, if all glory goes to God, if you catch the ball, it's gotta be God's fault if you don't.
Then you're not a good Christian. I'm just saying, like, if something goes wrong in your life, and then you have screwed up, that's on you, okay? But if anything good goes, then that's on God. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just want to say, as a logical matter, it can't be that you have agency only when things go wrong.
Well, again,
So
you're not
I'm perfectly happy to give all the glory to God, but I also want to say that the Kansas City Chiefs today should be cursing God because it's God's fault.
No, God spoke very clearly last night, and I think, I don't want to read too much into it, but I think it could be, again, I think it could be the beginning of things, everything being healed in the world. Like, the world is healing itself.
Mike Pesca, famed sports correspondent, as he actually is, what do you think about the theology of the Super Bowl?
Well, it was a great American, a prophet, a poet, MC Hammer, who once said, "You've got to pray just to make it today." And
That's right.
It's as true now as it was then. And members of the Golden State Warriors appeared in that video, and they weren't good for a very long time. And then when that entire roster rolled over 2 times, they became good. I think that maybe everyone in that game has their own agency, of course, and then they put their agency against the other player's agency, and also Vic Fangio's scheme for pressuring the quarterback, which was the entire,
Oh my gosh,
entire point of the game.
it was amazing.
Yeah. So can't it be the case that perhaps, and look, I'm just playing not devil's advocate, but what's the opposite?
You're just
Yeah,
playing the devil.
right. But can it be the case that everyone found whatever within himself to, or be it God, spirituality, the self-help book that A.J. Brown reads on the sideline, or just Dumbo's feather, and they get a little better, and then their best or their betterness or their right, so they're achieving all they can achieve, and then they put it against someone else who's using their own relationship to the Lord, Dumbo's feather, or the winner within, and that guy's doing all he could do, and the coaching and the circumstance and injuries, and you add it all up, and one team won. So you say, I want to credit the guy that made me do all I could do. It turns out that all I could do, all that was able to come from me, with me and my Dumbo's feather / God, was able to beat the other team. So I don't know if there's a logic in that, but if I believed in that, that's how I'd see it.
No, well, I'm just saying, today, by the way, it's a Shoebill shirt day. And so we're going to talk a little
cool.
bit about Shoebills later on in the show, because they have a
Glowering.
very
He's a glowering Shoebill.
anti-theological approach to parenting and other matters. But I just want to say, I think we should take God's role in sports events very seriously, and that means that if you are a Kansas City Chiefs fan today, you should be cursing God because it's God's fault. All right, we are joined by the great Mike Pesca. We're also joined by Nastia, who's at a mall in Kiev, and I wanted to introduce you guys because Nastia and I today are releasing the trailer for our this project we've been working on for a year, which
Correct.
is the history, a podcast history of U.S.-Ukraine relations post-Soviet. It's an 8-part, 7-part, we're not sure yet, sort of documentary. And Nastia is coming to Washington in a couple weeks for the launch. And so
In a week, yeah.
I thought, first of all, since she sometimes co-hosts the show, I thought I would introduce her to you, Mike. Nastia, Mike, Nastia.
Hello.
Hi, Nastia.
I'm in a kid's store with my daughter.
Show me some shelves. What would it look like 3 years ago? How would it be different? It seems pretty well stocked.
Wait, I don't know why my phone is being weird right now.
That's
is this
one thing.
better than the other way
Skynet.
around?
Well, you're sideways. But
Okay,
you
I'll
look
just
good sideways.
We just turn our heads.
No, it's fine. I'll just do this. Ava, say hi.
Oh, that's a cutie. There's a cutie.
Yep. I know.
Oh, the smile.
He's so confused. Anyway, so we're shopping before the trip.
I
It's
have
really
never had a
weak.
more parasocial relationship with a baby than I have with that
What
one.
does that mean? What's parasocial?
Well, like I feel like I know her really well, and she has no concept of who I am at all. But
Every
like I
time
feel like
your
I talk to her every day, and
yes, every time your toys arrive, I say that those are toys from Ben. So we
yeah, and
talk
she's
about your
like, blah 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 toys.
no, actually, blah 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 toys boxes that toys arrived in. That's what she's actually
Yeah.
interested in.
All right. So
Maybe
Mike,
the baby will one day credit her relationship with Ben for achievement.
Oh, that's
Yes.
what the player should have done too. Like I thanked the Ben for all the blessings.
All the Ben.
Yes,
the
me
Ben
too.
penetrates
Me too.
and surrounds us, yes.
so Mike, how has your do you have since you are actually among other things a sports a commentator,
Yeah.
you even wrote a book about sports.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Super Bowl?
It was so very, very boring and very disappointing. And I think it gets a little more boring when they leak all the commercials beforehand. And it's not a leak. I mean, this is why commercials exist. So I had to contemplate my entire existence to commercials and these commercials. And I think the greatest trick the Super Bowl ever played was to get us to think of the commercials as something special. So you see a commercial outside the Super Bowl context, and it seems not special at all. Okay, Issa Rae is telling us to do our taxes. But then within the context of the Super Bowl, it's like, oh, wow, they got Issa Rae. I don't know, they get celebrities to tell you to do your taxes in a way that no celebrity would ever do their taxes on an app, you know? So this is what we're forced to think about as Patrick Mahomes' line decides not to protect him at all. At all. It's the craziest way for an excellent team to lose. Just don't protect your quarterback. Don't have any injuries.
It was unbelievable. I'm like,
Yeah.
where are these guys?
Right. And you could say, oh, the defense was so tricky. They fooled the offensive line, and the offensive line didn't understand where the pressure was coming from. No, they did. They just got beat. The defensive line of the Eagles just pushed them back. And sorry, Nastia. This is
Can I rain on your parade a little bit and ask someone to like give me a quick briefing on why this is such a big deal?
Well, think of the greatest soccer tournament in all of Europe every year coming together, and they have these CONCACAF
Right.
and actually
I actually been at that when I was like 12 or something.
right. And
Anyway.
Ukraine actually hosted a couple years
It
before the war.
Yeah, so I was like 11 when that happened. or
Right.
something like
So imagine the same club had won 2 years in a row, and no club had. So whether it was, we'll pick the similar color scheme. So Man U had won 2 years in a row, or this last 2 times they had it, and they were gonna maybe win for the 3rd time in a row, and they got decimated. They
Oh,
were
that's
just
bad.
not.
That's
It
just
wasn't
bad,
even
yes.
close. It was 3-0, 10 minutes in, and yeah. So it's
So what
disappointing.
happened?
It was a thing of beauty, Nastia. It was not bad. It was
But
fantastic.
were we rooting for this team or were we not rooting for this team?
I was
It
rooting for the winner.
depends how much you like Taylor Swift.
No,
Oh, that's her boyfriend is playing in that,
Hurt.
right?
yeah. I love Taylor Swift, but not last night. I was not on her side. So
What I was
This is
rooting
so
for, Nastia, was for the Eagles to win, but within 1 to 3 points. And Mike, Uncle Ben's friend Mike would have done pretty well had that happened. But it was okay. Mike did pretty well anyway. Although it was such a boring game, I'd rather have it just be a good game.
So Mike Pesca,
Yes.
while everybody else in the world was watching the Super Bowl except Nastia, I was writing a letter of recommendation. And that's, something that, like, it's just, the burden of being me, that when everybody else in the world is watching the Super Bowl, I sit at this very little desk thingy and write letters of recommendation.
That
I
is
wrote
very
2
kind
of them
of you.
yesterday.
You were a mentor to many, and whoever that recommendation was from. I mean, look at you. You reach across the lands and time and into the heart of a girl who doesn't even know you. You're just a kind man, Ben, is what I'm saying to whoever that letter of recommendation was for.
All right, so I have a question for you, which is, we've now had, it's basically 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks of the Trump administration? Yeah. Better or worse than you expected?
Now it's getting interesting for me. Thank you, Ben.
Let's see.
Entertaining you, Nastia, is really the whole point.
Okay. I would say he has set in motion, he and his people have set in motion, in a reap the whirlwind sort of way, the potential for us to look back in a year, and I think it's likely we will say I'd say 70% chance, most likely we will say worse. But I also think that there's the 30% chance, well, I don't know, 15 the same and 15 better. And the reason I'm saying that is he has 2 initiatives, one that I like, one that I love, and they're right there for the Democrats, and they never took them, and they will definitely change my life. And I think that the downside of a couple of his big actions are potentially profound, and that's USAID, which you've talked a lot about. That's also funding for colleges, what's called F&A, or the additional funding that colleges or universities need to do research. Unless he changes that in a big hurry, America is going to really suffer. But we could talk about the 2 really good programs, and I do think a lot of, not to be too vague, there's a whole category of things that they take a lot of our attention, but they won't really affect anything, maybe through no fault of his own, right? Maybe because the courts just say, birthright citizenship, what are you talking about? So I'd say 70% chance that it's worse, and then 15 and 15, evenly divided between somewhere near the same and maybe even better.
All right, so I want to ask you, the first thing that the Trump presidency did that I love happened last night,
Yes.
which is announcing that we are no longer going to mint the penny.
Yes.
And I just want to say I am proud that we finally have a president who made that order.
However, Ben, complication is, according to the analysis I read, is that he can't actually do that. It requires an act of Congress. So again, this is my issue with everything he's done. I mean, some of the things maybe are good, but he's doing most of it not the way it's supposed to go.
Well, so that's right. I mean, look, message, Congress, get on it. We have presidential leadership on the penny. Finally, let's get on it. But secondly, Mike, when you, my ears perked up when you said two initiatives, one of which you liked and the other of which you loved, because until the penny initiative, I was for about, I don't know, 30, 40, 50. So what are the initiatives that so far in the 3 weeks of the Trump administration, other than the penny, unless the penny is one of them, that you either liked or loved?
Loved was the penny. And I've been talking about banning the penny for years. When I interviewed Pete Buttigieg when he was an unknown running for president, my last question was, will you ban the penny? And he laughed and demurred and wouldn't commit. First time I was ever asked that. Well, I've been thinking about it. The visionaries have. And I asked Michael Bennett about this, and I asked Ron Wyden, and I asked, there was some other candidates, actual candidates. I think it was Moon Landrieu. Is he Moon or was his dad Moon? Anyway,
no, his dad was Moon.
Yeah, whichever Landrieu. Mitch Landrieu. I would always ask every presidential candidate, and I guess I mostly talk to Democrats, if they would ban the penny, and they acted like, oh, what a crazy idea. It's not a crazy idea.
No.
Every penny costs. This is Trump at his best. He was even underselling for the first time the destruction the penny has wrought. He says it costs 2 cents to make a penny. He'd have been more correct if he had doubled his estimate. This is the first time he's ever said that. It costs almost 4 cents to make a penny. We make 3 billion of them. And yeah, it's true. He might not have the authority to do it. But unless he starts it this way, daring the Democrats to act or just show themselves to be more likely to sit on their hands to try to stick him with the loss than to actually help America. I mean, this is the great one. This is the great one. This is the leadership we've been looking for.
I've been for this since I was in Australia for staying with a friend 20 years ago, and discovered that Australia did not have 1 cent. They rounded everything up or down. And so I was like, this blew my mind. And I was like, of course, this is the way. Who wants a penny? Yeah. And so I've been a believer since then. And then my husband is an economist, and he says all economists are in favor of this.
Yeah.
So what else is there? What are we doing?
So guys, we have finally found the thing that the Trump presidency, we love about the Trump presidency. One problem: do it the right way, Mr. President. Go to Congress, ban the fucking Penny Act, for Jonathan Rauch, ban the effing Penny Act of 2025. But we're with you, Mr. President. Presidential leadership on the big issues of our time. All right, what's the other one?
Paper straws.
The one that you like.
Paper straws. Paper straws are terrible. And there's been new technology that are not plastic and are somewhat biodegradable, but reversing the Biden order to move towards paper straws in 2020, whatever, that was the right thing to do. I've also long been on a crusade to point out that plastic straws have a negligible impact on the environment. And everything we think about plastic straws comes from, at the time, he was a 9-year-old kid named Milo, which is my son's name, so I have an affection for him. He's now an MIT grad, but some 9-year-old kid just announced, oh, there are 500,000 plastic straws in the environment, and the media thought it was cute and went with it. And plastic straws have almost no effect on the environment. I've done many segments on my show trying to tell you what a bad effect plastic straws have. I do think the analysis around the activism around plastic straws has it entirely backwards. It just
I don't even have to endorse
keep
yourself
plastic
muted.
straws. I have to ban. I'm in favor of the executive action saying the federal government should not be in the paper straw business, and we shouldn't. Good job, Mr. President. Good job.
All
And
right.
you could do that one.
So we're gonna talk about paper straws, plastic straws in a minute, but John Hawkinson seems really committed to creating a major echo on this show. So let's give him a chance to talk. All right, unmute yourself now.
Trivially. All right. Sorry about that. I just wanted to interrupt before you switch topics to note that Congress has already conferred this authority to the Secretary of the Treasury in 31 U.S.C. 5111 A1. The Secretary of the Treasury shall mint and issue coins described in 5112 in amounts the Secretary decides are necessary to meet the needs of the United States. So this is not an instance where Trump has gone off the rails with respect to congressional authority.
All right. And that is all I need. I have a cited statute giving the president the authority to take this policy position. I am content that he is acting in Youngstown Category 1, the high watermark of presidential power. And Mr. President, go after the penny, round them up, melt them down, turn them into shells to ship to the Ukrainians. And by the way,
it'll become a Trump statue.
Yes, we will preserve
okay with that
with the thinnest of copper shells a Trump statue.
Unfortunately, round them up describes too much of his other policies, and that is why it's the 70% bad likelihood.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. On the one hand, we've got pennies and plastic straws, and plastic straws do not weigh very much on one side of the scale, and on the other side of the scale, we have the destruction of the U.S. federal government and giving the keys to all your personal data to Elon Musk and defiance of a whole bunch of statutes. How does it weigh up?
The personal data, look, maybe I'm ignorant on this. It seems to, I'm not as upset about it as the actual things he's done to USAID. Do you say USAID? I've always said USAID, but if someone says
I say
USAID,
AID, but a lot of people say aid.
Yeah. I mean, that is weird. If the point was, it's not an accident, that's why it's called that, right? So why don't we say aid? But we
say
don't.
both.
Yeah. It's like spelling out whatever the U.S. Protection Against Terrorists Act was. The interesting thing to me is if we thought, as a thought exercise, if we thought that many of the excesses, to go back. So giving someone my personal data, I always assume the federal government, quote unquote, has my personal data. I don't know what Elon Musk can do with it. You could plan out different or sketch out different scenarios. I mean, if the problem is that the federal government is intent on putting a boot heel on my neck, they could do it with or without knowing what my social security number is. To get mad at the federal government for knowing my social security number, they're the one who gave me my social security number to begin with. What else do they need to know? I was born in a hospital. It was certified by the government. I'm not too worried about that. It's the actual effect of how they end all these programs and how they try to interrogate if the programs are good is to stop the program and then say, oh, that was good. Don't you appreciate it? And it's terrible. And this is why many people in the world will suffer. And the thing is, though, if we're being intellectually, at least exploring it in an intellectually consistent way, how they're ending the penny, there's some debate over whether he can actually enforce the, I just looked it up based on the Hawks code, gold clauses and consent to sue. That is the name of the U.S. code that he cited. Anyway, there's some question if he could do it, so he just does it. Well, that's what he's done with USAID, and that's what he's done with college funding, and that's what he's done with everything else. There's some question, not for me. I'm going to just do it and see what happens. And I think it's an incautious method, but if you don't do that, like if he didn't do it with the penny, things wouldn't change with the penny, would they? So this is a way, it's a bona fide theory of change in the often sclerotic federal government. And it really comes down to just a proxy for if we like the programs or if we don't. And sometimes
Nasia,
if we're
you have a thought before you disappear in a puff of smoke.
Yes. I just wanted to comment that it's very interesting to see what like non-Americans, how they perceive all of this mess, because everyone is so confused. I mean, Americans are very confused, but imagine like Ukrainians watching it all happen. It's so interesting. I was talking to an expert for my article on USAID and the meaning of its closure. And the lady was like, it's problematic, it's bad, but America has the rule of law and institutions are strong and it's all gonna figure itself out because Trump can just like do this and like things disappear. And everyone I talked to about it is like, for example, when I was telling my husband about the whole thing with Musk, he was like, doesn't he, like, can he get arrested? Like, where is like the security services that like should prevent this from happening? And I'm like, no one is doing anything. So everyone on the outside is used to perceiving the US as like, this is what we aspire to be, especially for Ukrainians. Like, we want to be like the US. We want to have those institutions. We want to have the rule of law like you guys. And then all of this is happening now, and everyone is like, oh, so like, all of that was an idea in our head, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. It's just really strange. Like, when people ask me, like when my husband is like, can they, like, why isn't anyone doing anything? I don't even know what to say, because that's a good question. Why isn't anyone doing it?
So it's not really true that no one's doing anything. It's just that the shock and awe of the action happens suddenly and the response happens slowly. So what is the rule?
Their idea, right? Like, that's what they wanted to do.
Well, yes, but it's not, again, it goes back to the question of how successful they will be. So, all right, so Elon Musk goes into the Treasury and gets a whole lot of information, or gets access to a whole lot of. Now, that's done with presidential authorization. And the response is a lawsuit or a series of lawsuits that seeks to enjoin it. Now, right now, they have a restraining order. So that is a response, and they will presumably ask for an injunction, and that will be a further response. The question really is whether the lawsuits will be successful in preventing whatever portion of Musk's activities are illegal. And those, when we resolve that question, that will be much less high profile and shocking and sudden than the entry in the first place. But I actually do think the courts are in a reasonable position to say, oh, okay, you're allowed to make Elon Musk a special government employee. You're allowed to provide special government employees access to information under the following circumstances, but you can't like just give them the keys to the kingdom, and because there's this statute and this statute and this statute. It's just that stuff takes weeks to sort out, whereas the initial action is a kind of shock and awe sort of thing, which is, of course, the way Trump does business. What do you think, Mike? Are we looking at will the rule of law look to have performed?
I can't listen to what you're saying. The baby's too cute. Sorry, go ahead.
Will the rule of law look to have performed better 6 months from now than it looks now, or am I just whistling past a graveyard?
No, this is what I said during the first administration, and that is the first Trump administration, and I guess you could say that hasn't mapped on to exactly to this one. But I always used to say professionals doing their job will deliver the republic, and so far that seems what's happening. We know what the narrative in Trump world would be. Aha, that's called the deep state. No, it's just called a functional state. So that's the answer to Nastia's question. And so far, he's over everything that the courts have had a look at. And some of these injunctions or stop work orders are just for a few days. But yeah, if he
I see what you did there.
he goes with if he goes with Musk more than his allotted, is it 180 days or is it somewhat smaller than that? There is as a non-confirmed employee, he could work for less than 200 days. And so if Musk stays on the job and given his attention span, that's not a guarantee. Beyond that, then he really does risk undoing everything he's done because it was done by a government employee who's beyond his time limit. So they'd be smart not to do that. I understand that the Democrats always criticize Musk as an unelected billionaire, and I guess I didn't see where billionaire elections were scheduled. But it bothers me a little bit that argument, blaming Musk, plays well, so they hit on it. But that's not the core of the argument, right? They hit all the other arguments, but the big thing they emphasize is who is the vector undoing all these laws. And the thing they should emphasize, I think, is that we have laws and they're being undone. It doesn't matter by who. It doesn't matter by a duly appointed proxy of Donald Trump or whatever you think of Elon Musk. There are laws and procedure, and you can't violate the laws. And birthright citizenship's a big one right there, plainly in the Constitution. But then everything else from the the Straw Act, which seems totally kosher, to the gold clauses and consent to sue act, that has to be adhered to.
What do you think of all this, Holly?
I mean, I'm completely horrified. I mean, clearly there's no precedent for this in American history of a private citizen being appointed with this much power. There's also real security concerns. Like, for instance, in USAID, they access to classified material. I mean, USAID has even compartmented SCI terminals in the building. And now I assume that they probably couldn't access those, but still a lot of just secret no foreign, which is sensitive stuff, or even just normal communications, because, you know,
when Holly says secret no foreign, that means classified at the secret level and designated for no transmission to foreigners.
Yeah, and even just their normal communications, you know, USAID is in the field communicating with partners. Some of those partners are under threat, and association with Americans is dangerous for them. Their programs are under threat, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, all of that information even things that may not be classified. It might be, there's an SBU designation in diplomatic channels, sensitive but unclassified. You know, it's very concerning on a national security front to me. But then just on a legal, I mean, I'm not a legal expert by any means, but yeah, how can you just dismantle whole agencies? To me, there's the only reason they're doing this is, you know, it's an authoritarian move. It's what other authoritarian regimes have done in the past, of where you get rid of the experts, you dismantle checks on your power, which the civil service, the nonpartisan civil service, is very clearly a check. Again, sometimes it's very frustrating because it's layers of bureaucracy and what have you, but a lot of that is designed as a check on power. You know, these experts have the expertise and the experience to bring to bear to policy issues, and know better than elected officials in many or most cases, like what the consequences of various policies and proposals might be. And so you remove them, it's an assault on rule of law. It's an assault on a functional state. It's also just part of a broader assault on expertise and a way to control information as well as the mechanisms of the government. So, I mean, to me, and then it's like the court orders. Okay, again, I'm not a legal expert, but I'm just waiting for, okay, who's going to make them, like, who's going to enforce that, you know? If
So
the
I want to bracket the question of who's going to enforce it for a minute, because I actually think there is an answer to that question that is,
because I want to feel better.
but bracket that for a second and say how much of Holly's point, Mike, stands, and if you get like, all right, let's say we get a whole lot of good court orders and they're upheld by the upper courts, which I think is probably in most cases likely. But the, you can't force the president to like give a lot of foreign aid, right? Like, I mean, the USAID people could win every battle and lose the war.
Yeah.
And my question is, what if every legal decision goes the right way? How much damage is there anyway?
Yeah, I think what he's done, especially with your bailiwick, with the Justice Department, and yours, Holly, with the CIA, that seems to be the most concerning to me by far. As far as executive agencies, where the executive can play a role if he wants to, that's governance. The way Trump is doing it is governance really haphazardly and for press release or maximum attention. But we saw under the Biden administration the total abdication of the press release as to tout how the economy's doing. And it makes I think America and Americans get rather depressed with it. And there'll always be critics, and those critics, the criticism seems a lot more well-founded when there's not someone making the positive case for these agencies. So I just think that if it turns out that Trump runs roughshod through the agencies and throws all these brushback pitches and doesn't quash the amount of funding that USAID gives, but allows, for instance, what I've heard is a lot of this is what you were talking about in the beginning. A lot of maybe Christian organizations will come in to do the research of the research institutions, and I know USA still already works with Samaritan's Purse, but maybe it becomes more of a religiously oriented organization. That won't be good, but it'll still be something that the system allows for. But yeah, the potential for firing people who engaged in a correct or correctly predicated investigation into even the guy who's still president or once and future president, that's horrendous. And we come back from that by, I guess, electing someone else and say it's not going to happen again and maybe rehiring the particular people. But that's a few years down the road.
Yeah, so let me put a finer point on that. The president has the power to do a huge amount of damage. Trump is exceeding the amount of power the president legitimately has, but the president legitimately has a lot of power to do a lot of damage. The courts can, and I think will, push Trump back from the zone in which he's in, which is wildly exceeding the president's power to do damage, back to something near the legitimate presidential power to do damage, and we're still all going to be surprised at how much damage that is, which is another way of saying you're both right. It's a floor wax and a cake topping. Old Saturday Night Live joke. Dessert topping.
Yeah, dessert topping.
All right, Mike, I got another question for you. You have talked at great length over the years on the Gist about flags.
Yes.
And you even have a segment on the show called the Vexillology Corner. Yeah.
Can you name this one?
Hold it up.
No longer in use.
No, I can't. It's like an Olympic flag.
It's not like the old Zaire, is it?
It is Zaire.
Whoa.
Wow. Just when I was
Holly,
saying, oh, expertise, Holly, what expertise? And there you
you
go.
know, you ask a CIA Africa analyst about the old Zaire flag.
Pretty
Well,
good.
West Africa, I'm weak on West, so we won't do.
So
That's
my
amazing.
question is, when the U.S. takes over the Gaza Strip and
Yeah.
Greenland,
Yeah.
and what's the flags going to be? What's going to happen to the maple leaf when
It'll
we
be
take
something
over
like
Canada?
this, but instead of VI for Virgin Island, it'll say GL for Greenland. And it may be instead of the laurel and the arrows, they'll have like a reindeer. The eagle will have a reindeer in one of his claws. You know, there's so many ways to go with this. The Greenland flag, can you conjure it?
No.
It's I guess
Hang
you
on,
could say
I'll
it's a
pull it up.
rising sun. Yeah, it's a circle, and the top half of the circle is in burgundy, and the bottom half is in white. And it's almost, I mean, you had so much you could do with Greenland, and that's what you go for. So maybe the American vexillological community, there we go. Maybe the American vexillological community can get in there and gussy it up if they want, with the participation of the Greenlandish people. Only 60,000 of them.
Yeah, I think what I see is Greenland and Canada are admitted to all together as one state because they don't want to give more electoral college votes and Senate. They don't want it to be two states because that's already going to be a Democratic boon, I think. And so you could, with it being red and white, you could easily just put the maple leaf on the Greenland flag and that's it.
I'm sure maple trees are not indigenous to Greenland. I'll look that up,
What
but
about
I'm pretty
Gaza?
sure.
What about the Gaza Strip?
Uh-huh.
I think, is that a state?
That's just going to become an amusement park and resort. It's not going to be a state. It's just going to be Trump property, I think.
Do you know, before the war, much before the war, there was an amusement park in Gaza, and it was shut down by Hamas being all Talibanish. There were many amusements in Gaza. You could do horseback riding on beautiful beaches and so forth. But there was, look, I looked it up, and it's like one of those amusement parks that that aren't on the main strip of Coney Island, but are on like the Belt Parkway. When you get to Coney Island, it's essentially like a traveling amusement park. But there was one. There was an amusement park in Gaza, and then Hamas ruined it, and some other things too.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, among Hamas's crimes in Gaza, shutting down the amusement parks, relatively low on the list. That said, what was the old slogan of this show? We're not allowed to have fun anymore. We're not allowed to have amusement parks
Isn't that
anymore.
still the slogan? It's still in the podcast version.
It is. It's still It's part of the theme song. So you're confident we can do well on the flags?
Yeah, I think we're not going to want to touch the Gaza thing. And although, I don't know what the rehab's going to be, but if they bring back, I just looked it up, the Crazy Water amusement park, people could, whoever breathed that into being would. Crazy Water amusement park.
Was it like a water park? Like
there was a water park involved, yes.
Oh.
All right. Well, that is something y'all didn't know, that there was a Crazy Water amusement park in Gaza. And, as it has been, so it shall be in the future, apparently. All right. What else should we talk about, Mike?
Okay, how about this? There's something about me. I love these thought experiments. So Holly said that there's a attack on expertise and security. I buy the security thing. But if you were to construct an argument towards someone who wasn't a raving lunatical MAGA person, but someone who didn't even vote for Trump, but someone who is somewhat sympathetic to the soft version of the idea that there are so many people in government or associated with government who have the title expert or who call themselves expert. And once you get labeled an expert, oh, you can't question them. And maybe they would cite, rightly or wrongly, some things that our public health community said, not necessarily even about opening schools, maybe that. Maybe they'd cite the time that the public health community encouraged people to protest against police violence because that was a public health initiative, even though there was a pandemic going on. By the way, my opinion, protesting against violence was fine. There should have been better communication on the lack of a risk of being outside, outdoor transmission. That was the big thing to me. Outdoor transmission was unlikely. But anyway, this is my thought experiment. Let's say you were to convince such a person who puts forward, here are these examples, and they were supposedly experts, and the experts were wrong. So what do we do? What's the mechanism? There is no vote on who's the experts. These people do get conferred experts through the system that Trump is pointing at, this minting system at elite colleges. Shouldn't something be done with that? Isn't there some possibility of reform? What would you say? Because I understand, the experts are experts and you got to listen to the experts. But what about when the experts are wrong and the experts run roughshod in a way that nobody voted for?
Well, I don't think that, first of all, there's different kinds of expertise. And some of the expertise I'm talking about is just running the government, the day-to-day. Like, if you turn over the whole civil service every time there's a new president, you don't have a functioning state anymore, because just getting everybody, you just lose a lot of institutional knowledge. These are institutions, and people are ultimately institutions, and they run the institutions. Experts, of course, can be wrong. All the time. That's one of the unfortunate things of this era, is that, MAGA can be, can spew 500 lies a day, but God forbid that, Dr. Fauci is wrong about one thing, about a new disease that nobody's seen, then that's like his whole credibility is gone forever, apparently. So experts can be wrong, but I mean, again, and having been in one of these institutions, there's internal correctives. There's constantly reviews of performance and hot washes. There's congressional oversight.
Right.
Congress
there used to be inspector generals. I'd add that to the mix.
There's inspector generals. There's just, in fact, a lot, I don't know what the percentage of the bureaucracy would be that would be sort of providing oversight and accountability, but that's why that's one reason why government has more bureaucracy than maybe the private sector, is because you're dealing with issues of public trust and public money. And so there are, like, these USAID contract people there's fraud or abuse or whatever. I'm like, look, having grown up as an evangelical missionary kid in Africa and having sort of known that world, there's way more fraud, waste, and abuse in just private charity circles than USAID oversight is much more by leaps and bounds than anything that private charities are doing. Trust me.
Yeah, to me, that's an interesting messaging question where I don't think most people know that. And the vetting of experts and calling out among the expert community in expertise, that process is an iterative process, is totally unknown, I think, to most Americans. So probably would be good to highlight that. And just like William Proxmire or one of these senators would always talk about the Golden Fleece, and here are these ridiculous programs, and sometimes exaggerated, sometimes not, would sound funny. Maybe a good attention. I come back to the way to get attention and showmanship. Some way that you could get attention to the fact that, we expunged bad ideas from our agencies, thus making the agency work better for you. The government needs to do a better job to sell itself like a private business, like how Elon Musk always talks about, what he's done with Starlink or what he's done with SpaceX and the efficiencies he's built into that. Something like that in the public sector would be welcomed, I think.
I would also say
that's kind of a cultural gap. I mean, bureaucrats are by nature, kind of modest, retiring folks. That's the kind of people you actually want. So it's kind of.
I have a different response to this question, which is that there's no alternative to expertise. So, if you're trying to decide, should we invade Iraq? Let's take the no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, mother of all expertise fuck ups, right? You're trying to decide, should we invade Iraq? And so you are trying to figure out, is there a real WMD problem in Iraq, or is there just, Saddam Hussein mouthing off? So let's say you decide, I don't really give a shit about expertise. These Berkley Fletcher analyst types are so full of shit, and they all went to the wrong schools, the right schools, and they're liberal elites. I know, but it's not true, but whatever. Let's say
That's why I identify the flag of Zaire.
So let's say you say, we're not going to ask the CIA, acknowledging that the CIA may fuck it up because predictions are hard, especially about the future. Analysis is a rough business. The experts may get it wrong. What's the alternative? Who else are you going to ask? You're going to ask you're going to hold a plebiscite? You're going to hold, you're going to go out in the street and say, hey, you, the guy in the Shoebill shirt, and remember to ask me about Shoebill parenting. What's going on with Iraq and WMD? What's the alternative to expertise? You have a pandemic. It's coming across the ocean. The experts say, put a mask on your face and maybe do social distancing and maybe actually don't go to work and keep your kids home from school. What's the alternative to that? Some guy who thinks you should inject bleach and shine bright lights and take, my point is, I don't think there's an alternative to expertise except, things that are not resort to magic, to, and I don't think you can run a government that way. So we can talk all day about what constitutes legitimate expertise, who's good at it, who's not, who's fucked up, who's done well. But at the end of the day, when you do it otherwise, you end up with, currencies in base 9, like happened in, was it base 9 or base 12 in Myanmar under the junta, and there's a reason we do currencies in base 10.
Well, so to channel a person pushing back, and I'm not one of these people who thought that Fauci was, should be convicted of anything or tried for anything. I thought he was mainly doing his job, to take Fauci, or to take the entire intelligence community who didn't see the Berlin Wall falling. The question, it's a bit of a...
Yeah.
It's a bit of a straw man to say, look, it's a choice between expertise and non-expertise or magic. I think they would say, if they're being honest or being fair, it's so-called expertise and actual expertise. What we're actually trying to do is just to get it right a lot more often, to call out when we're wrong, to correctly assess when we're wrong, and not to give ourselves excuses. I think the rocket engineers at SpaceX aren't not experts. They work under an Elon Musk version of expertise, which does have more firing. They're less comfortable, I guess, than government experts. The consequences of them being wrong because of the market are there for everyone to see.
And SpaceX rockets blow up sometimes.
Yeah, but they're saving a lot of us a lot of money because they're superior to NASA rockets. So set against the baseline, I think they're doing pretty well.
And wait. Who made the decision to contract with them to save that money?
Yes. Yes. But if they didn't, that guy should. If someone looked at the profit and losses sheets of what NASA was spending and looked at what SpaceX could do as a contractor, that person should be fired and probably wouldn't be put in some, sub-basement level.
And yet the entire business model of SpaceX, as I understand it anyway, is predicated on cost savings to the government that the government recognizes, and therefore those bureaucrat experts choose to work with it. I don't think SpaceX is a particularly good model.
Of what? Of experts working together with accountability who achieve something that we can that even the government experts agree works for us?
It's a perfectly good model of that. It's just not a model of the government expertise being supplanted by more efficient. It's an example of the government acknowledging that some things can be done more efficiently in the private sector, and so subcontracting to the private sector. Experts do that all the time.
Yeah.
The Pentagon doesn't build its own weapons.
Yeah, and you could make the same case about the our public health emergency and private companies making vaccines, and there's always integration, and I get all that. But the thought experiment was to try to answer someone who says, well, you were talking about how the alternative to expertise is something like magic. And this person would say the alternative to faux expertise is actual expertise. And there aren't many mechanisms to get that into place.
So
I mean, let's go. Yeah.
I agree with that, actually. And I think one of the interesting things about the bureaucracy is how capable it is of integrating those other forms of expertise. There are these CIA contractors that do a lot of work for the analytic capacity of the agency. Groups like the much derided Palantir that are examples of that, and I believe the CIA, In-Q-Tel, even gave them their seed funding.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's as sterile a picture as people think it is. I'm not saying as you're describing, I'm saying as the person you're channeling is describing, of a kind of sclerotic bureaucracy that thinks it knows everything, that, and there's this kind of vibrant sector that is doing the same work elsewhere that they won't even notice or recognize. I think that's just kind of a myth.
Well, maybe not thinks it knows everything, but has resigned itself to the idea that, look, there's no other way to do this, or I wish there were. Have you ever seen the pictures of the IRS desk? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
There was this, I think it was Washington Post, this great report about in the main IRS processing center, there's this desk that is a Jabberwocky, push me, pull you, just some sort of crazy Soviet-style abomination, because it's extremely hard to organize the old printed forms and to process our tax dollars. So this desk is the symbol of how sclerotic and impossible efficient bureaucracy is. And I don't think that it's unreasonable for someone to come in and say, this is crazy. This is the entire point to the Washington Post piece. And just the picture of that desk will convince anyone this is crazy. The people who work at the IRS say this is crazy. So you need an outsider or someone with force to come in and metaphorically wield a sledgehammer or whatever you want to call it. There needs to be, and there has to be, some better way to do this.
So he's not just fixing that. He's just destroying.
I think that Elon Musk, Donald Trump's theory of change isn't even that. It's a theory of change / retribution / I don't care / press release.
Not aimed at making it better.
But the idea of
rid of it.
I don't think you can reform by just sorry.
I am all for disruption in the business model, change, but it seems to me when you start by freezing AID spending, attempting to freeze all OMB contract grants, that's not a theory of constructive change. That's a theory of not doing it. And, it's like toward a theory of the state, toward a theory of blank by blowing it up. Like
I organize my house is I just throw everything away.
I mean, it's like, it's like
spark joy.
it's like describing the October 7th attacks as, toward Palestinian independence, right? Well, no, it's actually toward murder and destruction of Palestine, but you can call it that if you want. It strikes me as sort of similar to that. All right, we are going to leave it there on that comparing Elon Musk to terrorists note, for which, by the way, no, I don't apologize. And so if Holly's friends on Twitter, what's his name?
Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk want to set a mob on me for comparing Elon Musk to terrorists. Bring it on. Come on. I'm not apologizing. We're going to leave it there. We're going to be back tomorrow. We got guests every day this week. Monday was the only day we didn't have a guest, and I said to Mike, come be our guest, and Mike was like, yeah, are we going to talk about the Super Bowl? And I said, yes, and I promised you we would talk about Shoebill parenting before we left. In the spirit of Mike Pesca, the spiel, I am now going to do the spiel about Shoebill parenting. I didn't plan this. And now, the spiel. The Shoebill has a unique approach to parenting. Shoebill couples mate for life. When they mate, they lay 2 eggs. The eggs hatch, they have 2 chicks. They feed them both. Over time, one chick looks stronger than the other. Eventually, the 2 chicks will fight. The winner keeps getting fed. The loser doesn't get fed anymore, withers and dies. Thus, does the Shoebill become the Sparta of birds,
I know which of my kids would win.
And I want to say this is like Elon Musk's approach to federal agencies. Keep the faith. We will be back tomorrow.